Okay, welcome, and this is the advanced figure drawing 2260, and I'm going to try to film the notes today for you. So there's an overall general view of the notes, and let's get started. First and foremost, I want to talk about proportions. We're going to be talking about the back today, and the back view has less landmarks than does the front view. And if you haven't already gotten it, I've got a handout up on the front. And what I'd recommend is if you have colored pencils, take notes right there. So I find that very helpful to just take notes right on the actual drawing. And this isn't out of your book. It's by a Dr. Julian Faw, and he does these anatomical drawings. It's funny, when I first got this, I got it from another artist, and he said, "This is secret. This is so much money to get this." And he goes, "I'll trade you for something else that you have." And so we traded, but he gave me the PDF of those. And then later I found the book, and it came from a $9 Dover book that had all these anatomical studies, and you can get it off of Amazon. So it's very impressive, but this comes out of Paul Roche's book right here. Here's the back view here. Here's the head length right here. So notice that if you see through the model, here's the chin length right there. And placing landmarks is really important. So we've got Bree is a great model, and she's here with us today, so she's going to help you out as far as understanding what you're looking at. But here we have the back of the head, right here. And then the overall landmark that you're going to be watching for is here is the shoulder line. This is one recommendation that I have for a lot of you when you're trying to see the basics. Draw the shoulder line and go to the edge, okay? And then draw the medial side of the arm. And look for your midline. Always get these two decisions in. In its basic shape, this is the shape of the torso from the back point of view. So that's helpful to know. And this is, on this view, you're looking at the posterior. So right here is an important landmark. And the landmark that you're looking at is the base of the scapula. So the scapula is really interesting, and you'll see it here on the skeletal system. Here's the scapula. And the scapula itself is a trowel-like shape, meaning that it just looks like, I guess, what I would call like a little shovel or a little trowel. And that's, if you can see things in simple shapes, that's the easiest way to think about it. Then it has what's called the spinous process. And I know I debated whether I should talk to you about this, but this is more detailed information. And many of you are familiar with the term, so fantastic, now you'll know a deeper level. So when the arm is below 90 degrees, the scapula stays flush or vertical with the spinal column. When it raises that arm above, and you can't really tell on this skeleton, that scapula shifts. And so there's no connection with the scapula to the back. It's floating on top of the thoracic chamber. Now, interesting enough, in your drawing, you'll either see this part of the spinous process or the medial side, but you won't see them usually simultaneously. So that's something to remember. Okay, we've got our spinal column. That's the major bones, and then the thoracic chamber. You've got the atlas, and these are all the cervical vertebrae. Now, this vertebrae right here ends, and this is one of the most important, and you can feel it on the back of your neck. That's that protrusion or bump. That's an essential landmark for the back view, and that's the 7th cervical, so you can count them down. Now the vertebrae are numbered, just like the rib cage is numbered. So there's 7 of these cervical vertebrae. And then coming down the spinal column, you have 12 thoracic. Okay, so they say T1, T2 examples. And then in this area, this is the lumbar region. And you have 5 lumbar vertebrae. And this is on a female figure where you get a really flat, where you don't have that quite on a male figure. Ending in the sacrum and the coccyx. The sacrum you can see, the landmarks here are the PSIS and the sacrum. And so you'll see that triangular form. Okay, now mostly the lecture that I want you to see today is I want you to be aware of the plane changes on this back view. And these are really important to understand these back view plane changes, because it helps you. If you just see this as a real flat form, it's not. And so light will help you to create some energy on that back view, but you have to know the underlying anatomy to do that. So I brought in this écorché. First off, I wanted to kind of highlight a drawing. I mentioned that I took a workshop this last summer by the amazing Amaya, and I'm not going to try to say her last name. She's Spanish. And this is a drawing that she did. This is a drawing. And it's mixed media. It has a lot of charcoal in it and other mediums. And it's just gorgeous. It's called Galerna. And you can look that up online. But I think it's one of the most gorgeous backs and an art form in and of itself. And that was one of the reasons why she did this. So here's the terminology that I want you to know on the muscles of the back, and I'm going to go over them one by one for you. Okay, so first and foremost, we just talked about where that 7th cervical is. Here's the 7th cervical. Here's the atlas right here, and here's the 7th cervical. So you have muscles that attach by way of tendon on that spot. And on the visual, you can see some of this that is part of the sternomastoid and the scalene muscles. But we're not talking about those major muscles. We're focusing on this muscle. And one of you asked me this last week. You cite your overall midline, and then this is the shape that I want you to see. So I drew this out for you. This is basically the shape of a kite. Can you see it? So that muscle, the trapezius muscle, starts right up here on the top of the nuchal ligament, which is a really strong cord that holds the neck. It's major, and you can see it right here. It starts and it originates right up in here. But it's a deep muscle, so the trapezius comes up over the top of that, and it looks like the shape of a kite. So when it inserts down on the 12th vertebrae. Okay, so it's a long muscle that's going down the back. And it's a filler up here. Underneath the actual trapezius muscle is a muscle called the supraspinatus. So we have the infraspinatus. Anytime in anatomy you have something that's infra, then you can be guaranteed that there's a supra on top of it. So this is the muscle that is deep underneath the trapezius muscle, and it is a muscle that you're going to want to know because that's the muscle that we really work out. That's a repetitive stress muscle for us as artists. That's where we get really sore. And so the trapezius comes up over that. So anytime you have muscle, you can imagine that it's like plywood, okay? So it stacks like this, layer after layer after layer. And just like plywood, that stacking of the muscles instead of one thick muscle it creates different functions within the back, but it also helps strengthen it. So on the deepest level of this back, we have a muscle that originates clear down here and goes the length of the back. And that's this muscle called the sacrospinalis right here. And some anatomy books will call it the rector spinae. So that goes the full length of your back. Okay? It ends in two little forms. And these are sometimes referred to loaves of French bread because they kind of look like that. Again, I don't know why in anatomy we always tend to name things after food. But these two, called the multifidus, sit at the base of the lumbar, and you can see them very simply, especially on a muscular back. Those are ending that whole long column, and you get two columns running down the side of the spinal canal. And that's this sacrospinalis and the erector spinae. So the next muscle that I want you to understand is a muscle that is, again, sitting underneath that plane of the trapezius muscle. So you don't see that separately. It's all on its own. But it creates the contour of the back. So it sits right in here. Notice, if you run a pencil across the back, it's not horizontal by any means. And you have this plane called the rhomboid. And the rhomboid looks like this. Here's the spinal column, and the rhomboid is literally a rhomboid shape. So that's where it's getting its name, is it's doing this, and doing this. So it's creating this shape in geometry. It's called a rhomboid, and this is tracking down in this direction, okay? So the muscles are inverting in, and they're right here. That's the rhomboid. Okay, and I've got that indicated on this plane, but it's a deep muscle underneath the layer of the trapezius muscle. Okay, so then the serratus. I always love saying that, serratus. Robert Liberace says that cooler than anybody I've ever heard. And it's also the muscle that interdigitates with the front of the view right here. Here's the serratus, and we talked about that in the front of the torso. So here's these little fingers that interdigitate, meaning they do this with the serratus, okay? And you can usually see about 4, and they're at an oblique angle like this. So on the posterior back view, you can see them not as, sometimes you'll think, well, this is actual, they're not going to see it here, are they? Okay, so you're going to see the serratus right in here, okay, as it comes across, and you'll see it as a shadow. Not like on the front of the view, on the serratus, you'll actually see this is the anterior of the serratus. And the serratus just means the serration of a knife in Greek. So I think that's kind of interesting how these things get their names. All right. So the next muscle group, we're going to get the serratus. We've got that. Now we're going to get a deep layer muscle that's really important, and I'll change markers right here to show you. So on your drawing here, if you've got a blue marker, this is sitting underneath this cavity. So here we have our scapula. And our scapula is packed on top. You know, you think the trapezius muscle is really thick and deep. Well, it has a padding of the sacrospinatus right here. And underneath this, it's packed. So this is where the infraspinatus comes out. And if you see on this drawing right here, this is a very small segment of this drawing that you can see. Okay, that's the infraspinatus. Now, this is a really important little triangle in medicine. This little triangle is where a doctor will put a stethoscope to listen to your heart or your lungs. And so it's kind of almost, there's nothing there. And then you get three, these are often seen as three forms. Not individual forms, but the three forms are seen together. And so you'll see this, I'm doing this for the benefit of the camera. So right there, this is the triangle that we're looking at right here. In that you have the infraspinatus, and then you have this next muscle. And these two are usually seen together, especially if someone lifts their arm up, you'll see it. But this, this little teres minor and teres major go underneath this form called the latissimus dorsi. And what it does is it draws the arm back and inward. And one thing that, I think I pointed this out to you in your book. If not, it's a good review. On this page of your book, on page 108 and 109, it has some beautiful little drawings that you can go in and duplicate. I love this book. I think this is a fantastic source of information. See how it shows the serratus coming in? Just indicate those little drawings in your sketchbook, and it really helps you to understand. But then it has a chart for each of the muscle groups. It tells you the point of origin and insertion. So, and it also gives the action of that muscle. And I think that's really helpful information, because how do you know how to draw that if you don't know what it does? So then, that's this group right here. And on top of this, this is not considered really a back muscle, but this is the muscle of the deltoid. So here's the deltoid. And notice that it has an anterior, a profile, and a back point of view. Okay? It has all those three. So again, that same deltoid that becomes part of the structure of the arm is sitting right here, and here's the spinous process, and it's sitting up underneath here. And here's the AC process from the back point of view. So you will have that as a landmark. You've got the seventh cervical, you've got the AC process. You've got your overall shoulder line. That's always essential to drawing this form. Okay, so the next muscle, we've covered all of these. The next muscle that we want to talk about is years ago there used to be a fashion style where a woman would take a sweater and throw it over her back and tie it. My husband and I went to Italy in 2000, and all the women in Italy, well, men and women, were wearing their sweaters like that. It was a fashion statement. It reminded me of how the trapezius sits. Well, in the same way, the latissimus dorsi is like a cape in some ways, or a bath towel. And it drapes over the lateral portion of the back. Now, as you look at this, it sits at the bottom. The top of the muscle of the latissimus is touching that wing point of this scapula. Okay, so that's how you'll know where to look for that. And when Bree starts to model, I'll show you on her back. Okay, so this is the latissimus dorsi. It runs along the thoracic chamber, and it inserts in a very important way. So let's get our crochet here. It's light. Okay, so here is the latissimus dorsi. Notice how it's sitting like a cape. Okay, so this is running at the base of the scapula and just over the tip of it. And it's originating on the spinal column. Now, it has a portion of that actually attaches or inserts to the high point of the pelvic structure. So remember how I told you on the pelvis, this is the high point? That's the point where both the external oblique and then we've got this beautiful cord coming off of the latissimus. That's where they insert. Okay, so you can see that on an athletic form. All right, we did the trapezius already, the deltoid. See if I didn't get anything. Okay, so drawing points that you want to remember. Remember that on the base of the back of the form, this is called the gluteal fold. On the bottom portion of that, the center line or midline right here is called the gluteal cleft. Oh, there I have that. Okay, so gluteal fold, gluteal cleft, right there. And then that's one of the very few landmarks on the back. So you'll see the intersection on a male figure more prominently than female, but sometimes you'll look across the form and see that distance. So on a female, these are the things you're going to want to look for. So you're going to look for the intersection on the medial side of the scapula. You're going to look for this intersection, and this lines up like this, and then like this. So again, remember how we talked about shapes, geometric shapes, and how important it is to be able to see this. So this back point of view, this is about 1 head length to the top of the pelvic structure. And it's creating this rhomboid-like shape. Trapezoid-like shape, there we go. And you can see the outer contour like this. So watch for your halfway point if you see the legs, and some of the same proportions apply that we talked about last week. So look for your highs and lows. And remember again that if you see the top of the spinous process of the scapula, you usually don't see the medial side. So you'll see one or the other, but usually not both. Okay, we have 24 vertebrae in the spine, 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, and 5 lumbar. So the general proportion of the spine is 2 feet 3 inches long. So from here to the gluteal fold, the proportion is about 2 feet and 3 inches long. So that's just a general idealized measurement, okay? Now here's the chance you have for anyone to ask me any questions. If not, we're going to get started drawing. Just kind of a basic review of what we talked about in 1260. Anyone have any questions? Okay, let's get started drawing. Thank you.